Alright guys, this might be a bit longer because there's a lot of things to go into with Aramintha here. So she's getting some buffs as well. Already a good unit, by the way. Wasn't a bad unit. Her buffs are to her 2. This is a buffing skill that whenever an enemy is burned, or excuse me, it increases attack of allies for 2 turns. Whenever an enemy is burned, basically does an explosion AoE damage that makes him unhealable for 2 turns. The damage for this is going up apparently 14%. That's pretty much the change here. Supposedly, according to what Smilegate's saying, it's going to be much better, and you know, it already hits pretty hard, but we'll see how much better 14% makes it. And then her 3, Fire Pillar, it's going to do everything it does right now, so AoE, 80% chance to burn for 2 turns. Increase caster combat readiness 50%. You can burn it to ignore effect resist, but it's also going to add a 50% chance to stun for 1 turn. Now, the thing that makes Aramintha hard is she can do 2 roles really well in both PvE and PvP. You don't see her as much in PvP because, you know, her ML counterpart was basically almost broken for the better part of, what, about 4 months now. But Aramintha herself was still a very good unit, so what happens normally is people have to choose between her 2 or her 3, which one to cast first, because you can cast her 2 first, get the buff off, but then it's hard to take advantage of the burn catalyst explosion thing, because most of the time you're not going to have a burn effect up unless someone else does it for whatever reason. Or you could use her 3, which is a big AoE fire damage, good percentage chance to put burn up, gonna have a stun now, and then increases her combat readiness by 50%, which means she can cast her 2 that much faster. That's generally in most PvP matches. Fire Pillar gets used first for obvious reasons, especially once the stun comes on board. And then you cast her 2 to get that extra AoE off while increasing attack damage. But in some cases, you know, you got that Arbiter Vildred or whichever unit. Well, hey, now I want to cast my increased attack buff for all my allies so that we can do our cleave or our AoE screw you, whatever's going on. You're not taking advantage of the burn, but who cares? And then you follow up with her 3, even though you don't get that combat readiness. But then you just run it with someone like Alots, who just combat readiness is her backup, and then blam, here comes Fire Pillar. So depending on what you got going on your PvP team, that's what you do. Now, for the most part, PvP-wise, depending on what you got going on, you generally want to run her with as much attack as well as crit chance as possible. Attack because her burns will tick super hard. It's not quite Silverblade Aramintha to where she puts up like 3 burn effects and you could have a character have 40% just die on their turn because her attack power was so high. But still, that 1 burn tick will do a lot of damage and should be calculated in your AoE damage for the most part, unless the team you're fighting has immunity or what have you. Now, combat readiness. The other thing that makes these skills both kind of weird is that they both have turn cooldown. They're kind of like, they work the same way that Angelica does in a sense. So this can go to 4 turn cooldown, and her 2/buff can go to a 3 turn cooldown. So PvP for the most part, though, you're going to want to get attack as well as crit chance. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, why not crit to 100% and crit damage? Hey, you can do that too, but attack is where your sustained damage is going to go. You say sustained damage in PvP? Well, she's not as effective even with the nerfs to ML Aramintha as a lot of PvP insta-kill units, so she's made more for sustain, although I'm sure people will build her as a harder hitting unit now, especially if they're just entering the game. But for the most part, that's generally what I'm going to recommend for her. Now, as far as artifacts go, you are going to want to run, depending on what you got, if you got a Time Matters. Time Matters is always good. Basically, you kill someone, next attack increases 18 to 36% damage, reduce skill cooldowns, so your cooldowns come back that much faster. Otherwise, of course, there's always Abyssal Crown for the stun or Sarah Wren for the debuffs. And then we'll get to PvE builds in a second, but if you are going to do PvE, This one's pretty good. Caster's attack by 4% after attacking all enemies stacks up to 5 times. You're gonna do PvE, and then as well as the debuff. The debuff ones work well in PvE. And lastly, if for whatever reason you don't like any of that, Necro and Undyne, extra combat readiness, never a horrible thing. Now, as far as Aramintha herself, as far as upgrades go, in general, you're probably going to want to increase Fire Pillar to the cooldown chance, and then effect chance once the stun goes off, assuming this upgrade sheet all remains the same. And then you're going to want to upgrade this to cooldown reduction as well. Damage dealt, we'll see how the damage goes, and are you going to be able to utilize that a lot whenever there's burns up? You know, depending on what you're doing, maybe yes, maybe no. Her one also puts a burn up, but for the most part, unless you're really hardcore into Aramintha, you know, maybe get this to +3 and be cool with it. And PvE-wise, I would recommend running her with someone else that inflicts burn, whether they're using Soul's Artifact or it happens to be whatever character that inflicts burn. I'd recommend that because that's going to make her 2 more effective. Attack buff, always good. And then this character is going to be really good against Golem for 1. Most of the Abyss and Automatron Tower stuff for the most part. And just AoE stack damage in general, so if you got like an AoE cleave team, that'll work. PvE-wise, the burn is actually going to help you do sustained damage on top of your little AoE and burst damage that you're going to be able to do. So, in general, just an overall really fabulous unit, and you're going to want to focus on attack, crit as much as you can, get her survivability up, and then a bit of effectiveness to amplify what her 3 and her 2 is going to be able to do, and her 1 to a lesser degree. So, and that's pretty much it for Aramintha, guys. Yeah, I want to tell a story, but it would make the video too long. But all right, guys. So I'll catch you guys later on. Peace out.